On November 5th, 2024, I handed Margaret Bennett $200 through a crack in her door. Payment number 58 for a debt that never existed. My name is Nancy Harrington. I'm 62 years old, and I've been doing this the first Tuesday of every month for 5 years. When Margaret snatched that envelope from my hands without so much as a thank you, I said nothing. I just smiled and turned to walk down those 5 flights of stairs, same as always. But that night something changed. That night, Evelyn Porter, my neighbor from the 4th floor, grabbed my wrist in the courtyard and whispered 7 words that would unravel everything. Stop paying them and check the cameras. The building at 1847 South Ashland Avenue had stood in Chicago's South Side for 73 years. 5 stories of red brick, no elevator, and the kind of worn-down dignity that comes from surviving decades of harsh winters and harsher economic times. I pulled my 2015 Honda Civic into the same spot I'd been parking in for 5 years, right where someone had spray-painted a faded rectangle on the cracked asphalt. November 5th, first Tuesday of the month, the day I, Nancy Harrington, widow and registered nurse at Cook County Hospital, fulfilled my obligation to the Bennett family. I locked my car and stood there for a moment, adjusting my purse on my shoulder. My hand brushed against the envelope in the inside pocket. $200 in crisp 20s. Not much for some people, but it represented 12 hours of overtime shifts in the ICU. It was money that could have gone toward Tyler's basketball league fees, or his new winter coat, or the rising cost of groceries. Tyler, my grandson. 10 years old, smart as a whip, and the only good thing left from my marriage to David Harrington. The stairwell hit me with the same smell it always did. Decades of cooking grease, mildew from pipes that probably hadn't been updated since the Kennedy administration, and something else. Desperation, maybe. The kind that seeps into the walls of buildings where people are just trying to survive. I started climbing. First floor, superintendent's apartment, radio blasting gospel music loud enough to rattle the windows. Second floor, the smell of collard greens and cornbread drifting from Mrs. Jackson's kitchen. My stomach rumbled. I'd skipped lunch again. Third floor, a young couple arguing about the electric bill. Their voices carried through the thin walls. "We can't keep living like this, Jerome." "Well, what you want me to do, Shanice? I'm working 2 jobs already." Fourth floor, Evelyn Porter's domain. Quieter here. Evelyn kept to herself mostly, though she'd been president of the Tenants Association back in the day. Saw everything, knew everything. Fifth floor, silence. That's what always got me about the Bennett apartment. The unnatural stillness, like a tomb sealed up tight, keeping the world out, or keeping something in. I stopped on the landing to catch my breath. My knees weren't what they used to be, and 5 flights of stairs had a way of reminding me I was 62, not 42. I wiped the sweat from my temples despite the November chill and stared at the blue-painted iron door. Apartment 504, the home of Margaret and Harold Bennett, ages 83 and 85 respectively, parents of David's first wife, Sarah, who died of breast cancer 7 years ago. When David and I married 6 years back, a whirlwind romance that I'd been foolish enough to believe was real love, I'd inherited them as family. And when David supposedly died 5 years ago in that oil rig accident up in North Dakota, I'd inherited something else. Their debt. $12,000. That's what they'd given David so he could take that job. Their entire retirement savings handed over to help their son-in-law provide for his new family. When the company representative, a man named Richard Tate, who I'd never seen before or since, showed up at my door with David's ashes, Margaret had collapsed in my arms, wailing. And then, 3 days after the funeral, she'd looked me dead in the eye and said, "Nancy, that $12,000 is all we had. Harold and I are old. We got no income except Social Security. Now David's gone, that money's gone with him. You're his wife. You gotta make this right." I'd been so broken by grief, so desperate to keep some connection to David's memory, that I'd agreed. $200 a month for 60 months. 5 years of my life, paying back money I'd never borrowed for a man I thought I'd loved. Only 2 payments left. 2 more months, and I'd be free. I knocked 3 times on the door, sharp, clear raps that echoed in the silent hallway. "Mom? Pop? It's Nancy." Nothing. I knew they were home. They never went anywhere. Harold's arthritis kept him mostly bed-bound, and Margaret claimed to suffer from chronic migraines and dizziness. I'd offered multiple times to help them get to doctor's appointments. I was a nurse, after all, but they always refused. I knocked again, louder this time. The sound of shuffling slippers finally came from inside, then the metallic scrape of the deadbolt sliding back, a sound like old bones cracking. The door opened maybe 4 inches, stopped by the security chain. Margaret's face appeared in the gap, wrinkled, suspicious, her eyes sunken and ringed with dark circles. She was only 83, but she looked 100. Her gray hair hung limp around her face, and she wore the same faded housecoat she always wore, a floral print that had probably been cheerful once, back in 1987. "That you, Nancy?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Yes, ma'am. I brought this month's payment." I'd learned not to expect warmth from Margaret Bennett, but still, every time I climbed those stairs, some foolish part of me hoped for a smile, an invitation to come in for coffee, maybe even a hug, some acknowledgement that we were family, that I was doing right by her dead daughter's husband's memory. I never got it. "Give it here," she said, extending one bony hand through the gap. Her fingers were knobby with arthritis, the veins standing out like blue highways on a road map of age. I pulled the envelope from my purse and offered it with both hands, the way I'd been taught to show respect to elders. "Here's this month's $200. I hope y'all are staying warm with this cold snap coming." Margaret snatched the envelope with surprising speed, like a bird of prey striking. She didn't count it, didn't even look at it, just stuffed it directly into the pocket of her housecoat. The gesture was so automatic, so practiced, that something cold crept up my spine. "Tyler doing all right?" she asked, though her eyes didn't meet mine. Instead, she glanced past me toward the stairwell, as if checking to see if someone else was coming. "Yes, ma'am. He's doing real good. Made honor roll again this semester. He asks about his grandparents all the time." I paused, gathering my courage. I was thinking, since I'm almost done paying the debt, maybe this weekend I could bring him by. Let him spend some time with y'all. I know it's been a while. "No." Margaret's face hardened. "Harold's leg is acting up something fierce, and I got one of my migraines coming on. A child in the house. All that noise and running around, we can't handle it. Not at our age." "He's 10, Mom. He's real quiet when he needs to be. He just wants to know his family. We'll call you when we're feeling better. You focus on finishing those payments. That's what matters right now." Her voice was sharp, final. "And you best get going. Standing in this draft, you're going to catch cold, and then who'll take care of that boy?" Before I could respond, she shut the door. The deadbolt slid home with a definitive click. I stood there staring at the blue paint, fighting back the lump in my throat. 5 years. 58 payments. I'd climbed these stairs 58 times, handed over $11,600 in cash, and not once had I been invited inside. Not for water, not for a moment's rest, not even to use the bathroom. Tyler had been in that apartment exactly 3 times in 5 years, and each visit had lasted less than 15 minutes before Margaret hustled us out with some excuse. Why? I pressed my ear against the door, listening for any sound of life inside. A television, Harold's voice, the creak of floorboards. Anything. Silence. Absolute unnatural silence. Like no one lived there at all. Or like someone was hiding. I shivered and pulled my jacket tighter, turning toward the stairs. My heart felt heavy, the same weight I'd carried for 5 years pressing down on my chest. "David, you left me with this burden," I thought. 2 more months and I'll have paid it all back. Why do your folks still treat me like a stranger? Why won't they let Tyler know them? The questions had no answers, so I started down the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. I didn't know it then, but in that moment someone was watching me through a crack in the blinds. Eyes that weren't old and roomy, but sharp and calculating. Eyes that had been watching me every month for 5 years, waiting for me to leave. Eyes that belonged to a man who was supposed to be dead. The courtyard hit me like stepping into a different world. After the tomb-like silence of the 5th floor, the noise and life felt almost jarring. November sunshine, weak and pale but still warm, filtered through the bare branches of the 2 oak trees that somehow managed to grow in the small square of dirt. A group of boys Tyler's age were playing basketball on the cracked concrete court, their shouts echoing off the surrounding buildings. Several women sat on benches near the entrance, snapping green beans into bowls and talking in that animated way that meant good gossip was flowing. I headed toward my car, keys already in my hand. I needed to get across town to pick up Tyler from his after-school program, then home to make dinner, then help with homework, then get ready for my overnight shift at the hospital. The endless cycle of a 62-year-old woman raising a 10-year-old boy alone. "Nancy Harrington, that you, baby?" The voice stopped me in my tracks. I turned to see Evelyn Porter rising from one of the stone benches near the building entrance. She was 75, tall and straight-backed despite her age, with silver hair styled in a short natural. She'd been sitting there fanning herself with a piece of cardboard despite the cool November air, but now she was walking toward me with purpose. "Miss Evelyn," I managed a polite smile despite my exhaustion. "How you doing today?" "I'm fine, child. The question is, how are you doing?" Her eyes, sharp and knowing behind her glasses, searched my face. "Come sit with me a minute." It wasn't really a request. Evelyn Porter might have retired from the Tenants Association, but she still carried that air of authority. You didn't say no to Miss Evelyn. I sat beside her on the bench. She glanced around the courtyard, checking who might be within earshot. The women snapping beans were too far away to hear, and the boys were too absorbed in their game. Evelyn leaned close, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You just went up to pay those Bennetts again, didn't you?" I blinked, startled. "How did you—" "Child, I know everything that happens in this building. Always have." She fixed me with a look that was part compassion, part fear. "And I'm telling you right now, next month, don't you give them 1 red cent." My mouth went dry. "Miss Evelyn, I don't understand. I only got 2 payments left. It's for the $12,000 David borrowed. I know what you think you're paying for." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes were wide now, intense. "But listen to me good, Nancy. The dead ain't always as dead as we think they are." A chill ran down my spine despite the sunshine. "What are you talking about?" "David died 5 years ago. We got the death certificate. We brought his ashes back from North Dakota. I ain't talking about ghosts." Evelyn cut me off, her voice hard. "I'm talking about flesh and blood. Living, breathing human beings walking around in the middle of the night." The courtyard seemed to tilt around me. "Miss Evelyn, you noticed how quiet that apartment is during the day?" She didn't wait for me to answer. "I live right below them, Nancy. Right below. And let me tell you something. During the day, it's silent as a grave up there. But come 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, I hear footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Not the shuffle of an old man with arthritis. Real walking. Young walking." "Could be," I started, but she squeezed my arm tighter. 3 weeks ago, I couldn't sleep. My back was acting up. I went out on my little balcony to get some air, maybe smoke a cigarette I'm not supposed to have." She glanced at me, a hint of mischief in her eyes despite the serious topic. "Don't you tell my doctor." "I won't." Anyway, I'm standing there at 2 in the morning and I see a shadow, a man's shadow, coming up the outside stairs, wearing one of those hoodies pulled up, walking with a limp. Right leg normal, left leg dragging just a little bit. Left shoulder dipping down when he put weight on it. My heart started to pound. "Lots of people walk with a limp, Miss Evelyn." This wasn't just any limp, Nancy. Her eyes bored into mine. "This was the same limp your husband had after that motorcycle accident back in Tutine. You remember that? When he broke his left ankle and was hobbling around for months?" The world stopped. David's motorcycle accident. July 2018. He'd been showing off on his Harley, taken a turn too fast on Lakeshore Drive, and ended up with a fractured ankle and 2 cracked ribs. He'd walked with that exact limp. Right side normal, left side dragging, for nearly 4 months while it healed. Miss Evelyn, that's not possible. You must have been mistaken. Maybe it was someone else. Someone who... I'm 75 years old, Nancy, but I ain't senile and I ain't blind. She released my arm and sat back, but her gaze never left my face. And here's the thing that really got me. This man, whoever he was, he didn't knock. He took a key out of his pocket. A key, Nancy, and he opened that door like it was his own house. Walked right in like he belonged there. It could have been a relative or... And you know what else I noticed? Evelyn continued as if I hadn't spoken. Every time you come to bring that money, every single time, that same night or the next night, I see that shadow again. Like clockwork. You bring the money on the 5th. He shows up on the 5th or 6th, every single month. I couldn't breathe. The courtyard was spinning. The shouts of the boys playing basketball sounded far away, like I was underwater. Now, I ain't saying it's David, Evelyn said, her voice gentler now. But I am saying you need to check. The building just installed security cameras, Nancy. Brand new ones put in last month because of all the break-ins. There's one right there on the landing between the 4th and 5th floors. She pointed up at the building. I followed her gaze and saw it. A small black dome camera mounted in the corner where the 4th floor landing met the stairwell to the 5th. You got a nephew or somebody who knows about computers? Evelyn asked. Someone who could get you that footage? I nodded slowly. My nephew Bobby. He works in IT security. Then you call him, you get that footage, and you see for yourself who's been climbing those stairs at 2 a.m. She stood up, adjusting her cardigan. I'm an old woman, Nancy. I don't got much time left on this earth, but I'll be damned if I'm a sit by and watch a good woman like you get played for a fool. She started to walk away, then turned back. And Nancy, when you find out the truth, and you will find out, don't you come back here crying and broken. You come back ready to fight, because whoever's running this game on you, they've been doing it for 5 years. That ain't desperation. That's calculation. With that, she walked back to her bench and sat down, picking up her fan like nothing had happened. I sat there frozen, my mind racing. The dead ain't always as dead as we think. Same limp as your husband. Used a key to get in. Shows up every time you bring money. I stood on shaking legs and walked to my car. Got in, put the key in the ignition. Sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. David couldn't be alive. I'd received the death certificate from North Dakota. The company representative, Richard Tate, had brought us the urn with David's ashes. We'd held a funeral. I'd cried over that urn for months. But, why had we never been allowed to go to North Dakota to identify the body? Too dangerous, Tate had said. The accident was catastrophic. Best to remember him as he was. Why had they cremated him so quickly? Company policy for liability reasons, Tate had explained. Humanitarian grounds. Why had the Bennetts insisted on the debt repayment starting immediately after the funeral? We're old and broken, Nancy. We need to know we'll survive. Why did they never let me or Tyler into their apartment? Why was it so silent during the day but active at night? Why did Dorothy Williams from the 4th floor once mention seeing Margaret take out trash bags full of pizza boxes and beer cans, David's favorite foods, when 2 old people on fixed incomes claimed to barely have enough to eat? The pieces had always been there. I'd just been too trusting, too grief-stricken, too obedient to see them. I started the car and pulled out into traffic, but my mind was elsewhere. If David was alive, if he'd faked his death and let me suffer for 5 years while I paid money to support him, then I hadn't been paying back a debt. I'd been funding a con. I didn't sleep that night. After picking up Tyler from his after-school program, making dinner, helping with homework, and tucking him into bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of sirens, the soundtrack of Chicago at night. My laptop glowed in front of me. I'd opened my budget spreadsheet, the one where I tracked every penny. There it was, highlighted in yellow. Bennett debt, $12,000 total. Below it, a running tally. Month 1 through month 58, 200 each equals $11,600. Christmas gifts, 5 years, $500. Birthday gifts, 10 total. $400. Emergency medicine donations, $200. Thanksgiving dinners I'd brought, $300 total paid, $14,000. $14,000. That was nearly a year of my salary after taxes. That was Tyler's college fund. That was the down payment on a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. That was security, breathing room, hope. And if Evelyn was right, if David was alive, then I'd been paying for a lie. At 6:47 a.m., I picked up my phone and called Bobby Sullivan. Bobby was my nephew, my sister Patricia's boy, 28 years old and working as a cybersecurity analyst for a firm downtown. When he was 15 and getting into trouble, I'd been the one who steered him toward computers instead of the streets. He owed me, and he knew it. Aunt Nancy? His voice was thick with sleep. It's not even 7. Bobby, I need a favor. An important one. Something in my tone must have alerted him, because he went quiet. What's going on? How hard would it be for you to access the security camera footage from my in-laws' building? A pause. That's... Aunt Nancy, that's surveillance footage. I'd need authorization. Bobby. I closed my eyes. I think David might be alive. Silence on the other end. Then, I'll be at your place in an hour. Bobby showed up at 8:15 a.m. with his laptop bag and 2 cups of coffee from the Starbucks on the corner. I'd called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Whatever was on those cameras, I needed to see it. Okay, Bobby said, setting up at my kitchen table while Tyler ate cereal and watched cartoons in the living room. The building's security system is managed by SecureWatch Chicago. They use cloud storage for all footage. I've got a buddy who works there who owes me a favor from when I helped him pass his certification exam. Can he get the footage without getting in trouble? He doesn't have to know what I'm really looking for. Bobby's fingers flew across his keyboard. I'll tell him you dropped your wallet on the stairs and need to see when it might have happened. What dates am I looking for? The 5th or 6th of every month, between 1 and 3 a.m. for the last 3 months. Bobby's eyes met mine. He didn't ask why, just nodded and started typing. 20 minutes later, he turned the laptop toward me. November 6th, 2:47 a.m. The footage was black and white, grainy but clear enough. The camera angle showed the landing between the 4th and 5th floors, capturing the bottom of the stairwell leading up to the Bennett apartment. A timestamp in the corner read 11:06/2024, 2:47:23 a.m. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then a shadow appeared at the bottom of the frame. My heart stopped. A man climbed into view. He wore a baggy jacket with the hood pulled low, a baseball cap underneath that, and a black face mask covering the lower half of his face. But it was the walk that made my blood run cold. Right foot, normal step. Left foot, slight drag, the toe catching just a bit. Right shoulder, level, left shoulder dipping down when weight transferred to that side. Stop, I whispered. Slow it down. Bobby adjusted the playback speed. Frame by frame, the man climbed the stairs. The limp was unmistakable, identical to the way David had walked for 4 months after his motorcycle accident. The man reached the landing outside apartment 504. He didn't knock, didn't hesitate. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a key ring, selected one key with practiced ease, and inserted it into the lock. The door opened. He slipped inside. The door closed behind him. 2:47:58 a.m., 35 seconds total. Play October, I said, my voice steady despite the roaring in my ears. Bobby pulled up October 6th. 2:51 a.m. Same man, same walk, same key, same door. September 6th. 1:43 a.m. Same pattern. Aunt Nancy, Bobby started. That's David's jacket, I said quietly. The gray one with the black zipper. I bought it for him at Eddie Bauer in 2019. I'd know it anywhere. Bobby saved all 3 videos to a USB drive and handed it to me. What are you going to do? I closed my hand around the drive. 5 years of evidence. 5 years of lies. I'm going to find out the whole truth. That afternoon, while Tyler was at school, Bobby and I sat in his car outside a Chase Bank branch on Western Avenue. This is illegal, Bobby said for the third time. I know. I could lose my job. I know. If we get caught, Bobby, I looked at him. That man took $14,000 from me. $14,000. If he's alive, I need to know what he did with it. I need to know why. He sighed and opened his laptop. Harold Bennett and Margaret Bennett. You said they bank at Chase? They've been cashing their Social Security checks there for 20 years. Bobby's fingers flew across the keyboard. I didn't ask how he was accessing the bank's systems. I didn't want to know. 5 minutes later, he whistled low. Aunt Nancy, you need to see this. He turned the screen toward me. A bank statement for a joint account in the names of Harold Peter Bennett and Margaret Jane Bennett. Account number ending in 4729. Monthly deposits, $1,140.00. Social Security to Harold. And $1,283. Social Security Margaret. Regular as clockwork for the past 5 years. Monthly withdrawals. Surmounts. They haven't touched their Social Security in 5 years? I stared at the numbers. How is that possible? How are they eating? Paying utilities? Look at the balance. Bobby pointed. My eyes found the number at the bottom of the statement. Current balance. $87,341.18. $87,000. Just sitting there, accumulating. Now look at this. Bobby pulled up another screen. I cross-referenced their address with utility payment records, their electricity and gas bills, paid in cash every month at the currency exchange on Ashland. Water bill, cash. Building maintenance fees, cash. Someone's giving them cash, I said slowly. Someone who doesn't want to leave a digital trail. That's not all. Bobby's face was grim. I found something else. David had a life insurance policy through his employer in North Dakota. $100,000 death benefit. Guess who the beneficiary was? Me? Nope. The policy was changed 3 weeks before the accident. New beneficiary, Margaret Jane Bennett. The room tilted. They got the insurance money? Paid out in full, June 2019. $100,000 transferred to that same Chase account. Want to guess what happened to it? Tell me. Withdrawn in cash. $10,000 at a time over 10 days. All of it gone by July 1st. He met my eyes. But their Social Security, money they actually need to live on, just keeps piling up. I sat back, processing. David had changed his insurance beneficiary to Margaret. Then he died. She'd collected $100,000 in cash. Meanwhile, they were making me pay back $12,000 in monthly installments while their own money sat untouched in the bank. It wasn't desperation. It was a system. There's more, Bobby said quietly. I found David's old phone records. Up until November 2019, 6 months after he supposedly died, his cell phone was still making calls. What? Look, he pulled up a spreadsheet. The calls stopped being billed to his account in November 2019, but before that, he was calling one number repeatedly. A guy named James Crawford. Does that name mean anything to you? Jimmy Crawford. David's best friend from high school. The one who'd cried at the funeral and promised to take care of Nancy and Tyler, then vanished. I know him, I said. He lives in Gary, Indiana. Works as a manager at Crawford Auto Repair. Bobby pulled up a Facebook profile. And look what he posted 3 weeks ago. The photo showed Jimmy at a bar, raising a beer to the camera. But what made my breath catch was his wrist. On his left arm, clearly visible, was a watch. A Seiko sports watch with a blue face and a metal band. I knew that watch. I'd given it to David for our first wedding anniversary. Had the back engraved, N&D Forever, 2019. And on the metal band near the clasp was a deep scratch from when David had crashed his motorcycle. That's David's watch, I whispered. You sure? I'm sure. I gave it to him. I'd know it anywhere. My hands started shaking. Why would Jimmy have David's watch unless David gave it to him, unless they're still in contact? Or unless David's hiding near him? I looked at Bobby. Can you track Jimmy's movements? Illegally? Bobby. He sighed and started typing. 10 minutes later, he had his answer. Jimmy works at the garage during the day, goes home around 6, but every night around 11 p.m., he drives to an abandoned warehouse in the back of the industrial park where he works. Stays there about an hour, then goes home. What's he doing there? I don't know, but that warehouse is registered to Crawford Auto Repair. It's been sitting empty for 2 years, according to county records. Bobby looked at me. You think David's there? I thought about the videos, the cash, the watch, the lies upon lies upon lies. There's only one way to find out. But first, I needed one more piece of evidence. The most important piece. That Saturday, I drove Tyler 3 hours south to Greenfield, Indiana, David's hometown. I told him we were visiting his father's grave, bringing flowers now that I'd almost finished paying the debt. Do you think about Dad a lot? Tyler asked from the passenger seat. I glanced at my grandson. So innocent, so trusting. I think about the man I thought he was. What does that mean? It means sometimes people aren't who we think they are, baby. Sometimes we only see what they want us to see. The Greenfield Cemetery sat at the edge of town, surrounded by cornfields that had been harvested down to stubble. The November wind cut across the flat Indiana landscape, making the bare trees creak and sway. David's niche was in the columbarium wall, 3rd row from the top, a black granite plaque with his name, his dates, and a photo of him smiling. The urn sat behind a small glass door, locked with a simple key lock. I had a copy of that key. David's uncle, who managed the cemetery, had given it to me the day we interred the urn. In case you ever want to clean it or add anything, he'd said. Tyler, baby, why don't you go look at that big oak tree over there? See if you can find any cool leaves. Okay, Grandma. He ran off, happy to explore. I waited until he was out of sight. Then I pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, and hit record. I propped it against a nearby headstone, angled at the niche. My hand shook as I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The glass door swung open. The urn was ceramic, dark brown, with David's name and dates engraved on a brass plate. I'd never touched it before. Had always been too heartbroken. Now I lifted it out and set it on the ground. It was lighter than I expected. Using the screwdriver I'd brought, I carefully pried at the sealed lid. The silicone resisted, then gave way with a soft pop. I lifted the lid and looked inside. Empty, not completely empty. At the bottom sat a thin layer of dust and 5 smooth stones, the kind you'd find at any landscaping supply store, each about the size of a plum. No ashes, no bone fragments, no cremated remains of any kind. Just rocks. For 5 years, I'd mourned over rocks. For 5 years, Tyler had prayed to rocks. For 5 years, this family had visited a grave that held nothing but a handful of landscaping stones. I picked up one of the rocks, turned it over in my hand. It was cold and smooth and utterly ordinary. "Oh, David," I whispered. "What did you do?" I spoke to the camera, my voice steady despite the tears running down my face. Today is November 16th, 2024. I am Nancy Marie Harrington, widow of David James Harrington. I have just opened my husband's urn at the Greenfield Cemetery in Greenfield, Indiana. Inside, there are no ashes, no remains, just 5 decorative stones. This proves that David Harrington's death was faked. This proves that everything I've been told for 5 years was a lie. I put the stones back, sealed the lid with the quick-dry epoxy I'd brought, placed the urn back in its niche, and locked the door. When Tyler came running back with a handful of colorful leaves, I was composed, smiling. We placed flowers at the niche together, and my grandson said a sweet prayer for a father he'd never really known, a father who'd never existed in the first place. That night, after Tyler was asleep, I met Bobby at a 24-hour diner on I-65. "I got the footage from Jimmy's warehouse," he said, sliding his laptop across the table. I hacked into the traffic camera at the intersection nearby. Watch. The video showed Jimmy's truck pulling up to a large metal warehouse at 11:37 p.m. He got out carrying 2 large grocery bags, walked to a metal roll-down door, and knocked in a pattern. Hard, soft, hard. The door rolled up. A man appeared in the opening. Even from the distant traffic camera, even in the grainy night vision footage, I knew. Thinner, bearded, hair long and unkempt. But the height, the build, the way he moved. David, my husband, the father figure Tyler thought was dead. The man I'd cried over, mourned for, honored with my suffering. Alive, living in a warehouse while I worked 60-hour weeks to support him. "What do you want to do?" Bobby asked quietly. I closed the laptop, finished my coffee, looked my nephew in the eye. "I want to hear him say it. I want to record him admitting what he did. Then I want to destroy him." "Aunt Nancy?" 5 years, Bobby. 5 years of lies. $14,000. A little boy growing up without a father because his father chose to abandon him. Margaret and Harold making me feel like I was lucky they even let me make payments. My voice was cold now. All the grief burned away into something harder. I'm 62 years old. I've been a nurse for 40 years. I've saved lives. I've held dying people's hands. I've worked through holidays and birthdays and my own health problems. And this man, this coward, has been hiding in a warehouse, eating pizza and drinking beer with my money while I've been breaking myself to take care of his responsibilities. So what's the plan? Tomorrow night, we go to that warehouse. We record everything, and then we call the FBI. The FBI? I pulled out my phone and showed him what I'd found earlier that day. A news article from November 2019, buried in the North Dakota Tribune archives. Federal investigation expands in oil field drug ring. The article mentioned several workers from Dakota Energy Solutions being investigated for drug trafficking. One name jumped out. David James Harrington. Last known address, Chicago, Illinois. Status, deceased. He wasn't just running from debt, I said, yes, they said. He was running from federal charges. He faked his death to avoid prison. Bobby let out a low whistle. And you've been funding his hideout? Not anymore. I stood up, leaving cash for the coffee. Tomorrow night, the dead man rises. And when he does, I'm going to be there to put him back in his grave. This time, permanently, Monday night, November 18th, 11 p.m. Bobby and I sat in his borrowed Honda CR-V 50 yards from the warehouse at 2847 Industrial Parkway in Gary, Indiana. We'd been here since 10:30, parked behind a rusted shipping container that provided cover. The industrial park was a graveyard of failed businesses, empty lots, chain-link fences topped with razor wire, buildings with broken windows like empty eye sockets. The warehouse Bobby had tracked was the largest, a corrugated metal structure that might have stored auto parts once, but now sat dark and silent. Except it wasn't empty. "Here he comes," Bobby whispered. Headlights swept across the lot. Jimmy Crawford's F-150 pulled up to the warehouse's roll-down door. He killed the engine and got out, carrying 2 plastic grocery bags that looked heavy. I adjusted the professional-grade voice recorder Bobby had bought from a surveillance supply store. It was clipped to my jacket collar, tiny but powerful enough to pick up conversations from 30 feet away. "Stay in the car," I told Bobby. "Aunt Nancy, if something goes wrong, you call 911, but I need to do this." I slipped out of the car before he could argue. The November wind cut through my jacket as I crept toward the warehouse, staying low behind rusted barrels and abandoned equipment. My knees protested. 62-year-old knees weren't made for this. But adrenaline pushed me forward. Jimmy knocked on the metal door. Hard, soft, hard. The same pattern from the traffic camera footage. The door rolled up with a shriek of metal on metal. Light spilled out. Yellowish, harsh fluorescent lighting. And then he appeared. David Harrington. My husband. Tyler's grandfather. The man who was supposed to be ash and memory. He was alive. Even knowing it, even having seen the videos and found the empty urn, seeing him in the flesh made reality tilt sideways. He was thinner, maybe 30 pounds lighter than I remembered. His hair hung past his shoulders, greasy and unkempt. A thick beard covered half his face. He He wore a stained tank top, cargo shorts, and flip-flops despite the cold. But it was him. Those eyes, that nose, the way his left shoulder dipped when he walked. "Did you bring everything?" David's voice was rough, like he'd been smoking too much. "Everything. Beer, groceries, cigarettes, new clothes. You're living like a damn king in here, man." Jimmy laughed as he handed over the bags. "A king in a metal box that's freezing in winter and boiling in summer. I'm going crazy, Jimmy. The mosquitoes in the summer about ate me alive." They both disappeared inside. The door started to roll down. I moved fast, slipping along the warehouse wall. Found a gap where two metal panels didn't quite meet, maybe 3 inches wide, but enough. I pressed my recorder against it and my ear beside it. Their voices came through clearly. "Drink up. It's cold." That was Jimmy, the pop and hiss of beer cans opening. Then David's voice. "That's good. Real good. So how's everything looking? When can I finally get out of this hellhole?" "Should be soon, man. Your wife's almost done paying." "What's she got left? 2 more months?" "2 more payments. 120 days. Then I disappear to Mexico and this nightmare is over." I pressed record on my phone as backup, hands trembling. "You know your wife's a saint, right?" Jimmy said. "And you're a complete bastard." David laughed. "A living bastard. That's what counts. You know what kills me? Nancy hasn't suspected a thing. Not once in 5 years. She just keeps climbing those stairs, handing over that money like clockwork. My mom and pop play their parts perfect. Crying poor, talking about medicine and bills. She eats it up. Don't you feel bad? Even a little? Feel bad?" David's voice hardened. "I went to North Dakota to make money for them, for Nancy and Tyler and the whole damn family. You know what happened? I got in with the wrong people, started running product to make extra cash. FBI caught wind of it. I was looking at 25 years in federal prison, Jimmy. 25 years. My hand flew to my mouth. Federal prison. Not just debt, not just gambling, drug trafficking. So yeah, I faked my death," David continued. "What choice did I have? The FBI was closing in. I owed $50,000 to the wrong people. I had to disappear, and this was the only way. Mr. Tate from the company, he hooked me up. For 10 grand, he gave me a death certificate and an urn full of rocks. FBI thought I was dead. The drug dealers thought I was dead. Everyone got off my back. But your wife? What about her? Nancy's young. Well, younger than me. She's pretty. She's got a job. She'll find someone else. I actually did her a favor. Now she can rebuild her life without me dragging her down. And Tyler?" A pause. Then, "Tyler's not my blood. He was Sarah's grandson from her first marriage. I got no obligation to him." The words hit me like a physical blow. Tyler wasn't his blood. No obligation. This was the man I'd loved, the man I'd mourned. "The money, though," Jimmy pressed. "Making her pay your parents back, that's cold even for you." David laughed again, and the sound made my skin crawl. That was the genius part. My parents needed money to keep me fed and hidden, but they couldn't suddenly start spending big. People would talk. So we invented the debt. Nancy pays them $200 a month in cash. They pass it to me. Meanwhile, their Social Security just piles up in the bank. When I'm gone, they'll be set. Nobody suspects nothing. What about the insurance money? That $100,000 Margaret got? Bought me 2 years of safety. Paid off the biggest debt collectors. Greased the wheels for the fake death. Set up this place. His voice turned bitter. It's almost gone now. That's why I need Nancy to finish the payments. Once I have that last $400 and the cash my parents saved up, I'm crossing into Mexico. Got connections in Guadalajara. New name, new life. They'll never find me. You're really just gonna leave? Never see Tyler again? Never tell Nancy the truth? What truth? That I'm a coward who chose himself over them? Hell no. Better she thinks I'm dead. Better they all think I'm dead. In 2 months, I really will be dead. Dead to them forever. I pulled away from the wall. I'd heard enough. My legs were shaking as I made my way back to the car. Bobby took one look at my face and started the engine. "You got it?" he asked. I held up the recorder. "Every word." "What now?" "Now we call the FBI. Tuesday morning, I sat in a federal building in downtown Chicago, across a desk from Special Agent Linda Morrison of the FBI. She was 40-something, sharp-eyed, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She'd listened to my recording twice, reviewed Bobby's video footage, examined the photos of the empty urn, and studied the bank records. Now she sat back in her chair and looked at me with something like respect. "Mrs. Harrington, do you have any idea how long we've been looking for your husband?" "No, ma'am." 5 years. David Harrington was part of a drug trafficking operation that moved methamphetamine from Mexico through North Dakota's oil fields and into the Midwest. We arrested 17 people. David disappeared right before we could bring him in. We assumed he fled to Mexico, but we could never confirm he'd crossed the border. The death certificate from Dakota Energy Solutions seemed legitimate. We closed the case. "It was fake," I said. "Ed. Richard Tate, the company representative who brought me the urn. He was paid $10,000 to manufacture the paperwork." Agent Morrison nodded. "We'll be bringing Mr. Tate in for questioning. Document fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. He's looking at serious time." She leaned forward. "And your husband, your late husband, is looking at 20 to 30 years. Federal drug trafficking charges plus 5 additional years for faking his death and defrauding an insurance company. Plus the state charges: identity fraud, theft by deception, elder abuse." "Elder abuse?" "He used his elderly in-laws to perpetrate a fraud against you. That's financial elder abuse, forcing them to participate in criminal activity. Margaret and Harold Bennett are looking at criminal charges, too." My chest tightened. "They're in their 80s. They're accomplices, Mrs. Harrington. They collected $100,000 in fraudulent insurance money. They've been operating a cash-based fraud scheme for 5 years. At their age, they'll likely get probation and house arrest instead of prison time, but they will face consequences. And they'll be required to pay full restitution." "How much?" Agent Morrison consulted her notes. $14,500 that you paid them directly, $100,000 in insurance fraud, plus penalties and interest. We'll seize their bank accounts to start. The $87,000 they've saved will go to you first. $87,000, the money they'd hoarded while making me believe they were destitute. What about Jimmy Crawford?" "Accessory after the fact. Harboring a fugitive. He'll do 3 to 5 years. She closed her folder. "We're going to raid the warehouse tonight. 2 a.m. when your husband thinks he's safe. I need you to stay home, stay quiet, and wait for my call." "Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." She stood and offered her hand. "Mrs. Harrington, what you did took courage. Most people in your situation would have let it go, not wanted to know the truth. You're a brave woman." I shook her hand. "I'm not brave, Agent Morrison. I'm just tired of being lied to." I didn't sleep that night either. At 2:47 a.m., my phone rang. Agent Morrison's voice was crisp, professional. "It's done. David Harrington is in federal custody. James Crawford is in custody. We're executing a warrant at the Bennett residence now." "Is he—" I couldn't finish the question. "He's alive and unharmed. Surprised but unharmed. He tried to run but didn't get far." A pause. "He asked about you. Asked if you knew." "What did you tell him?" "I told him his wife sent us. That she's the one who figured it out, collected the evidence, and brought him to justice. I wanted him to know who beat him." After she hung up, I sat in my dark kitchen and cried. Not for David. I had no tears left for him. I cried for the 5 years I'd lost. For the innocence Tyler would lose when he learned the truth. For the version of myself who'd believed in love and family and doing the right thing. That woman was gone. The woman who remained was harder, wiser, and free. May 2025. I sat on the small balcony of my new apartment in Hyde Park, a 2-bedroom place with actual sunlight and a view of the park. I'd bought it with the restitution money, $87,000 from the Bennett accounts, plus another $43,000 from the sale of David's motorcycle and tools that had been in storage. plus the remaining balance of the fraudulent insurance payout. $130,000 total. Tyler's college fund was fully funded. I'd cut back to part-time at the hospital. We were safe. The sentencing had happened last week. David got 28 years in federal prison. He'd be 96 when he got out, if he lived that long. Margaret and Harold received 5 years of probation and house arrest. They were barred from contacting me or Tyler. Their apartment was seized. They'd moved to a nursing home in Indiana, paid for by what little remained of their Social Security after restitution. Jimmy Crawford got 6 years. Richard Tate got 8 years for his role in the fraud. Tyler took it better than I expected. He was 11 now, old enough to understand that the grandfather he'd mourned had never really existed anyway. "Grandma?" he called from inside. "I'm ready." I smiled and stood up. It was Saturday. We were going to Navy Pier, something we'd never been able to afford before. As we walked to the car, Tyler slipped his hand into mine. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Anything, baby." "Are you happy now?" I looked down at him, at this beautiful, smart, kind boy who'd been abandoned by everyone except me, who'd watched me sacrifice and struggle and still managed to grow up good. "You know what, Tyler? I am. I'm happy." And I meant it. 1 year after the raid, I stood in the visiting room of the Federal Correctional Institution in Terre Haute, Indiana. David sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. He'd aged 10 years in 12 months. His hair was cut short now, showing gray. His beard was gone. He looked small. "Nancy." His voice cracked. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." I almost didn't. I kept my hands folded on the table between us. "But I needed to see you one more time. I needed to say something." "I'm sorry," he started. "No," I cut him off. "You don't get to apologize. Apologies are for people who made mistakes. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Every day for 5 years, you chose to let me suffer. You chose to take food from Tyler's mouth. You chose to watch me work myself to exhaustion while you hid and lied and stole." His eyes filled with tears. I was scared. I was desperate. I was desperate too, David. Every single month when I had to choose between paying your fake debt and buying Tyler new shoes. Every shift I worked with pneumonia because I couldn't afford to miss a day. Every time your mother slammed that door in my face. I leaned forward. The difference is, I was desperate and I chose to sacrifice. You were desperate and you chose to betray. What do you want from me? His voice broke completely. Nothing. I don't want anything from you anymore. I came here to tell you that Tyler and I are fine. Better than fine. We're happy. We have a beautiful home. He's thriving in school. I'm working part-time and actually getting to be a grandmother instead of just a provider. We're building the life you should have given us. I stood up. Wait. He reached for me, chains rattling. I forgive you, David. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free of you. Completely free. You're going to spend the next 28 years in here, and I'm going to spend them living. Really living. And you know what the funny thing is? What? If you'd just been honest from the start, if you'd told me you were in trouble, that you needed help, I would have stood by you. I would have fought for you. But you didn't trust me with the truth. You thought I was too stupid, too weak, too naive to handle reality. So you lied. And that lie destroyed any chance we had. I picked up my purse. Goodbye, David. I hope you find peace eventually. I already have. I walked out of that prison into the bright May sunshine. Bobby was waiting in the car, Tyler in the back seat with a book. How'd it go? Bobby asked. It went perfectly. I buckled my seatbelt and smiled at my grandson in the rearview mirror. Now let's go get ice cream. As we drove away, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Tired, exploited, grieving a ghost. I thought about the woman I was now. Free, strong, honest. At 63 years old, I'd learned the most important lesson of my life. You can't build a future on someone else's lies, but you can build one on your own truth. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge. It's walking away. It's choosing yourself. It's living well. The debt that never was had finally been paid. Not with money, but with justice, truth, and the quiet strength of a woman who refused to be a victim anymore.